I am 75 years old today. My hands shake as I tell you this story. Some secrets are too heavy to carry to the grave. I stole millions from my own husband. Not alone. With a man who had only one good eye. A man who saw through me when no one else could. My name is Eleanor. For 40 years, I lived in a mansion with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. I had everything money could buy. Designer clothes. Exotic vacations. A handsome husband who looked like he stepped out of magazines. But I was empty inside. Hollow like those beautiful vases in my perfect living room. The man I married gave me wealth. The man I betrayed gave me something else entirely. He gave me fire. Danger. A reason to feel alive again. This one-eyed stranger changed everything. He made me do things I never imagined. Terrible things. Beautiful things. Things that still wake me up at night. We planned it for 2 years. Every detail. Every lie. Every stolen moment became part of our scheme. I learned to deceive like a master criminal. I learned to smile while my heart plotted. My husband never suspected. How could he? I was his perfect wife. His trophy. His prized possession. He thought he owned me completely. But possession is an illusion. Love is an illusion. Money is the only truth that matters. At least that is what I believed then. The night we finally took everything, I felt more alive than I had in decades. My pulse raced. My hands trembled with excitement. We were stealing from the man who had stolen my youth. My dreams. My authentic self. $7.2 million. That was our prize. Hidden accounts. Transferred funds. Forged documents. All of it planned with mathematical precision. I should feel guilty telling you this. But guilt is a luxury I cannot afford anymore. Time is running out. My story needs to be heard before I am gone. You might judge me. Call me wicked. Call me a thief. You would be right. But you would also be missing the point entirely. This is not just about money. This is about what happens when a woman disappears inside her own life. When she becomes invisible even to herself. My one-eyed lover saw me. Really saw me. Not the dress I wore or the smile I painted on each morning. He saw the woman drowning beneath all that perfect surface. And together we decided to take back what felt stolen from me. My power. My voice. My right to exist as more than decoration. The aftermath was brutal. Families destroyed. Hearts broken. Lives ruined. Including mine. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. Before the betrayal. Before the millions. Before I met the man who would change everything. Let me tell you about my beautiful, empty life with my handsome husband. Richard was magnificent to look at. Tall and broad-shouldered. Silver hair that always looked perfect. Eyes like blue steel. Women would stare when we walked into restaurants together. I was 23 when we married. He was 35. Successful beyond imagination. Real estate empire. Investment portfolio worth more than small countries. Everything he touched turned to gold. Our wedding was in the society pages. 300 guests. Champagne fountain. Orchestra playing while we danced on marble floors. I felt like Cinderella finally getting her prince. The honeymoon lasted exactly 1 week. Then reality began. Richard worked 18 hours a day. Even on weekends. Even on holidays. His phone rang during dinner. During movies. During the few quiet moments we tried to share. Business always came first. Always. I learned to eat alone. Beautiful meals prepared by our chef. Consumed in silence while Richard shouted into his phone about contracts and deals. I learned to sleep alone. He would come to bed after midnight, sometimes after dawn. Exhausted. Distant. His mind still spinning with numbers and negotiations. I decorated our mansion. Room after room of perfect furniture. Artwork chosen by consultants. Everything expensive. Everything tasteful. Everything cold. Friends visited sometimes. Other wealthy wives with their practiced smiles and careful conversations. We talked about charity galas and shopping trips. Never about loneliness. Never about the emptiness growing inside us. I tried having hobbies. Painting classes where I created pretty pictures of flowers. Tennis lessons at the country club. Book clubs where we discussed novels about other people's interesting lives. Nothing filled the void. Richard gave me credit cards with no limits. Jewelry that cost more than houses. Cars that purred like satisfied cats. I had everything except the one thing I needed most. Real attention. He looked at me the way he looked at his other possessions. Appreciatively but distantly. I was beautiful. I was well maintained. I reflected his success perfectly. But I was not seen. Not really. Years passed this way. I became expert at smiling. At making small talk. At pretending everything was wonderful while my soul slowly starved. Sometimes I caught glimpses of myself in mirrors and felt surprised. Who was this woman in the expensive clothes? When had her eyes become so empty? I started taking longer walks. Driving to places where no one knew me. Sitting in coffee shops where normal people lived normal lives. I envied them their simple problems. Their authentic emotions. My reflection showed a successful life. My heart knew the truth. I was disappearing. Day by day. Year by year. Fading away inside my beautiful cage. Richard never noticed. He was proud of me like he was proud of his cars. His artwork. His investment returns. I was proof of his excellent taste. His ability to acquire beautiful things. But I was not a thing. I was a woman. A woman who had forgotten how to feel alive. That is when fate intervened. Or maybe I called to it unconsciously. Desperate for something real in my carefully constructed fantasy life. I met him on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The man who would teach me the difference between existing and living. The man with one good eye and a heart that could see straight through me. His name was Marcus. I met him at the downtown library of all places. I had started going there to escape my mansion. To sit among books and feel connected to something real. Something honest. He was reading philosophy in a corner chair. Worn leather jacket. Graying beard. And that eye patch over his left eye that should have made him look piratic but somehow made him look wise instead. I noticed him immediately. Not because he was handsome. Richard was handsome. This man was something else entirely. Magnetic in a way I could not understand. He looked up from his book and caught me staring. Most people would have been embarrassed. I should have been embarrassed. Instead, I felt electricity run through my entire body. That one good eye seemed to see everything. Past my designer clothes. Past my careful makeup. Past the walls I had built around my heart. I approached his table. Something I had never done before. Not with strangers. Not with men. Good wives do not start conversations with mysterious men in libraries. But I was not feeling like a good wife that day. I was feeling like myself for the first time in years. We talked about books. About philosophy. About whether people ever really change or just reveal who they always were underneath. His voice was rough like sandpaper but warm like honey. When he spoke about Nietzsche and Camus, I felt my mind waking up from a long sleep. I learned he had been a professor once. Before life knocked him around. Before he lost his eye in an accident he would not discuss. Before he decided that wisdom mattered more than success. He asked what I did with my days. The question made me realize I had no answer. Shopping and charity lunches were not doing anything. They were just ways to pass time. I told him I was married. He nodded like he already knew. Like my loneliness was written across my forehead in letters everyone could read except my husband. We met again the next Tuesday. And the Tuesday after that. Always at the library. Always in the philosophy section where serious people came to think serious thoughts. He introduced me to books I had never heard of. Ideas that challenged everything I thought I knew about life. About right and wrong. About what people owe each other. Marcus made me feel intelligent again. Like my thoughts mattered. Like I was more than just decoration in someone else's story. He never asked about my money. Never seemed impressed by my clothes or jewelry. He looked at me like I was fascinating exactly as I was. Without any of the expensive accessories. This was dangerous. I knew it was dangerous. But danger felt better than the safe numbness I had been living in. After 6 weeks of library meetings, he asked if I wanted to see his apartment. A simple question that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. I said yes. His place was small and cluttered with books. Art on the walls that he had painted himself. Not pretty pictures like I made in my classes. Raw, honest paintings that showed pain and beauty twisted together. We did not do anything inappropriate that first visit. We just talked. About life. About dreams. About all the ways people betray themselves by choosing safety over truth. But something shifted between us. A recognition. Like two prisoners discovering they were locked in cells right next to each other. He walked me to my car that evening. Expensive car parked on his modest street like an alien spacecraft. Before I drove away, he touched my hand. Just for a moment. Just fingertips against fingertips. That tiny touch contained more electricity than all my years of marriage combined. I drove home to my mansion. To my absent husband. To my perfect life that suddenly felt like a beautiful prison. And I knew everything was about to change. Our relationship grew slowly. Like a fire that starts with just one small spark. I began visiting his apartment twice a week. Then 3 times. Then whenever I could escape my hollow routine. We would sit on his old couch drinking tea from chipped mugs. Talk for hours about everything and nothing. He showed me how to see the world with honest eyes. Marcus had lived a dozen different lives. Traveled through countries I could not pronounce. Worked jobs that taught him about real people with real problems. I had lived one life. The same day repeated for 20 years. Wake up beautiful. Stay beautiful. Go to bed beautiful. Repeat until death. He made me understand how much of myself I had lost. How I had become a character in someone else's play instead of the author of my own story. The emotional intimacy came first. Then the physical closeness followed naturally. Like rivers flowing toward the ocean. I'm not going to describe those intimate moments in detail. That would be disrespectful. But I will tell you this, for the first time in decades I felt alive in my own skin. Richard made love to me like he did everything else. Efficiently. Competently. With his mind already moving to the next task on his agenda. Marcus touched me like I was precious. Like every moment mattered. Like we were creating something sacred together. The guilt was terrible at first. I would drive home feeling like my sins were written across my face in neon letters. Surely Richard would notice. Surely someone would see. But no one looked closely enough to see anything. I was still the perfect wife. Still the beautiful accessory. Still invisible in all the ways that mattered. Marcus never pressured me to leave Richard. He understood something I was just beginning to realize. This was not about choosing between 2 men. This was about choosing between 2 versions of myself. The old Eleanor who lived for other people's approval. Or the new Eleanor who was discovering her own power. We met in secret for 8 months before the conversation changed. Before Marcus started talking about justice and revenge and taking back what was stolen from me. At first I thought he was speaking metaphorically. About emotional theft. About the way some marriages drain women of their authentic selves. But gradually I realized he meant something more concrete. More dangerous. More thrilling. He saw how Richard treated me. Like property. Like an investment that should provide steady returns in the form of beauty and social status. Marcus made me understand that I had contributed to Richard's fortune too. My youth. My social connections. My willingness to be the perfect wife while he focused entirely on building wealth. I had earned a share of that money. Even if the law and society would never recognize my contribution. This idea was intoxicating. Revolutionary. Terrifying and liberating at the same time. We started planning almost as a game. Hypothetical scenarios. What if questions that gradually became more serious. More detailed. More real. Marcus knew about money in ways I had never learned. Hidden accounts. Offshore banking. Legal loopholes that wealthy people used to protect their fortunes. He also knew about Richard's business. Had done research. Found weaknesses in the perfect facade my husband presented to the world. I provided inside information without really meaning to. Passwords Richard used. Bank statements I had access to. Social security numbers and account details that a loving wife would naturally know. Looking back, I can see how carefully Marcus guided me toward betrayal. How skillfully he nurtured my anger and resentment until they grew into something monstrous. But at the time it felt like awakening. Like finally fighting back against a system that had kept me powerless for so long. The plan took shape over months of careful conversation. Small steps that would eventually lead to something enormous. By the time I fully understood what we were going to do, I was already too deep to turn back. Too committed to our secret mission. Too hungry for the power I had never been allowed to taste. We were going to steal everything Richard had worked his whole life to build. And we were going to do it with a smile. The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. That is what made it so dangerous. Marcus had discovered something about Richard's business practices. Not illegal exactly, but ethically questionable. Deals that would look terrible in the wrong light. My husband had built his fortune by being ruthless. Buying properties from desperate people at below-market prices. Forcing out small businesses to build luxury developments. Perfectly legal. Completely heartless. Marcus showed me how to document everything. How to photograph important papers when Richard was not looking. How to copy files from his computer while he showered. I felt like a spy in my own home. Every dinner conversation became an opportunity to gather intelligence. Every casual question was designed to extract useful information. Richard never suspected because he never really listened to me anyway. I could ask about business deals and bank accounts and he would answer absently while reading emails or watching financial news. For the first time in our marriage, his inattention became an advantage instead of a wound. We identified several offshore accounts Richard used to minimize taxes. Nothing illegal but definitely secretive. Money hidden from everyone including me. The irony was perfect. He had been keeping financial secrets from me for years. Now I was going to use those same secrets against him. Marcus taught me about financial manipulation. How to create false documents that would look authentic. How to forge signatures that would pass casual inspection. I practiced Richard's signature hundreds of times until I could write it as naturally as my own name. My hand learned the rhythm of his pen strokes, the pressure he applied, the small flourishes he added to certain letters. We opened new accounts in different banks. Used my identification but with Richard's forged signature on the authorization forms. Created a paper trail that would make everything look legitimate. The technical details were complicated but the emotional preparation was harder. I had to learn how to lie with complete conviction. How to smile while betraying the man who trusted me most. Marcus coached me like a director preparing an actress for the role of her lifetime. We rehearsed conversations. Practiced casual deception. Planned responses to every possible question. I discovered I had a talent for manipulation I never knew existed. Years of being the perfect wife had taught me how to hide my real thoughts and feelings. Now I was using those same skills for darker purposes. The timeline was crucial. We needed to move quickly once we started. Transfer money before anyone could discover what was happening. Disappear before Richard could fight back. I memorized account numbers and routing codes. Learned how to navigate banking websites and wire transfer systems. Studied financial regulations so I could avoid obvious mistakes. The most challenging part was maintaining normal behavior while everything inside me was changing. I had to kiss Richard good morning while planning his destruction. Attend social events and smile at his friends while knowing I was about to humiliate him publicly. Some nights I would lie awake listening to him sleep and wonder if I was becoming a monster. If love could ever justify such complete betrayal. But then I would remember all the years of loneliness. All the times he had treated me like furniture instead of a partner. All the ways he had slowly erased who I really was. My guilt transformed into righteous anger. This was not theft. This was taking back what should have been mine all along. Marcus and I refined every detail until our plan was perfect. Timing. Documentation. Escape routes. We had considered every possible complication and prepared solutions for each one. The date was set for March 15th. Exactly 2 years after our first conversation at the library. We would strike during Richard's business trip to Hong Kong. While he was sleeping on the other side of the world, I would be systematically draining his accounts. $7.2 million would disappear in a single night. Transferred through multiple accounts. Converted to different currencies. Hidden in places Richard would never think to look. By the time he realized what had happened, Marcus and I would be long gone. Starting our new life together with money that felt like justice. The night before we executed our plan, I felt more alive than I had in 20 years. Terrified and exhilarated and powerful. Tomorrow the invisible wife would finally make herself seen. March 15th arrived with perfect spring weather. Ironic that such a beautiful day would become the ugliest moment of my life. Richard left for Hong Kong on the morning flight. Kissed my cheek absently while checking his phone. Reminded me to water his orchids and attend the charity luncheon on Thursday. He had no idea he was kissing his wife goodbye for the last time. Marcus came to the mansion that afternoon. First time he had ever been inside my beautiful prison. He looked around at all the expensive emptiness with something like pity in his good eye. We worked systematically. Room by room. Safe by safe. Gathering documents and access codes Richard thought were secure. My hands shook as I opened his private filing cabinets. 20 years of marriage and I had never violated his trust this completely. Never crossed this particular line. But crossing lines was exactly what I needed to do. To become someone new. Someone who mattered. The computer system was more complex than we expected. Multiple security layers. Password protections that changed weekly. Richard was paranoid about digital theft, never imagining the threat would come from inside his own home. Marcus was patient, methodical. He had prepared for these complications, brought equipment that could bypass certain protections, new techniques I could never have imagined. I watched him work and realized this was not his first time stealing money electronically. My one-eyed lover had secrets too. Dangerous secrets that should have frightened me. Instead, I felt more attracted to him than ever. His criminal expertise proved he was serious about our future together, about taking care of me in ways Richard never had. The first transfer happened at sunset. $2.1 million moved from Richard's primary account to one of our prepared destinations. The computer confirmed the transaction with a simple beep. That tiny sound represented the destruction of my old life and the birth of my new one. We continued working through the night. Account after account. Transfer after transfer. Moving money like pieces on a chessboard until Richard's fortune was scattered across a dozen different countries. I felt drunk on power. On the ability to take action instead of just accepting whatever life handed me. For the first time, I was the one making choices that mattered. Marcus remained calm throughout the entire process. Professional. Like he was performing surgery instead of committing theft. By dawn, we had moved $7.2 million into accounts Richard would never be able to trace. His signature on every document. His authorization for every transfer. All of it forged, but all of it perfect. I left a letter on his pillow. Short and simple. Explaining that I was leaving him for someone who actually saw me as human. Someone who valued me for more than my appearance and social connections. I did not mention the money. That discovery would come later. When he tried to access accounts that were suddenly empty. When he realized his perfect wife had become his perfect enemy. Marcus and I drove away from the mansion as the sun rose. My entire previous life packed into 2 suitcases. Everything else left behind like artifacts from someone else's existence. The drive to the airport felt surreal. Like floating through a dream where normal rules no longer applied. I kept expecting police sirens. Richard calling to demand explanations. Some consequence that would drag me back to reality. But nothing happened. The world continued spinning as if we had not just committed the crime of the century. Our plane lifted off exactly on schedule. Destination. A small country with banking laws designed to protect financial privacy. A place where $7.2 million could disappear completely. I looked down at the city where I had spent 20 years being invisible and felt nothing but relief. Whatever happened next had to be better than the beautiful emptiness I was leaving behind. Marcus held my hand as we flew toward our new life. His touch still sent electricity through my body. Still made me feel more alive than I had ever imagined possible. We had done it. Pulled off the perfect crime. Stolen millions and escaped without leaving any evidence that could be traced back to us. I should have been celebrating. Should have been planning how to spend our fortune. Should have been thinking about the future instead of dwelling on what we had just destroyed. But something felt wrong. A shadow at the edge of my consciousness. A whisper that suggested victory might be more complicated than I expected. I pushed those doubts away. Focused on Marcus. On freedom. On the new Eleanor who had finally learned how to fight back. The old Eleanor was dead. The new Eleanor was just beginning to discover who she could become. Paradise lasted exactly 6 months. We bought a villa in Costa del Sol. Ocean view. Private beach. Servants who spoke perfect English and asked no questions about where our money came from. Marcus painted while I learned to cook. Real cooking, not the decorative meals prepared by professional chefs. Simple food that tasted better because I made it with my own hands. For the first time in my adult life, I felt useful. Productive. Like I was contributing something meaningful instead of just consuming other people's labor. We made love on the beach at sunset. Walked through village markets holding hands like teenagers. Discovered small restaurants where locals gathered to laugh and argue and live authentic lives. I thought we had escaped. Thought we had won completely. Then Richard found us. Not physically. He never came to Spain. But his lawyers did. His private investigators. His accountants who specialized in recovering stolen assets. The legal papers arrived on a Tuesday morning. Fraud charges. Theft accusations. Demands that we return every stolen penny plus interest and penalties. Marcus read through the documents with his good eye while I paced around our beautiful villa feeling like a trapped animal. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records that traced our transfers. Handwriting analysts who identified my forgeries. Video surveillance from the bank where I had opened accounts using fake identification. Richard's team had reconstructed our entire scheme. Every step. Every lie. Every forged signature. We could fight the charges, but victory was impossible. The evidence was too strong. The money trail too clear. Marcus suggested we run again. Disappear to another country. Change our names and start over with whatever cash we could carry. But I was tired of running. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of being afraid. More than that, something had changed inside me during those months of freedom. I had tasted authentic life and realized that stolen money could not purchase real happiness. The villa was beautiful but empty. Just like my mansion had been empty. Expensive surroundings could not fill the void that existed inside me. I missed my family. My sister who had stopped speaking to me when she learned about the affair. My grown children who were ashamed of their criminal mother. I even missed some aspects of my old life. The charity work that had actually helped people. The friendships that had been shallow but genuine in their own way. Most painful of all, I realized that Marcus had been using me from the beginning. His love was real but secondary to his desire for money. He had seduced me emotionally first, then financially. I was not his partner. I was his mark. The wealthy woman he had targeted and manipulated into betraying her husband. The one-eyed lover who had seemed so wise and authentic was actually just another kind of thief. More sophisticated than street criminals but fundamentally the same. We fought about returning the money. About facing the consequences of what we had done. About whether our relationship could survive without the excitement of shared crime. Those fights revealed the truth about both of us. I had been motivated by loneliness and revenge. He had been motivated by greed and opportunity. Neither foundation was strong enough to support real love. I made the decision alone. Called Richard's lawyers and negotiated a settlement. Agreed to return most of the money in exchange for reduced criminal charges. Marcus was furious. Said I was betraying him the same way I had betrayed my husband. Said I was weak and stupid and would regret my decision for the rest of my life. He was right about one thing. I was betraying him. But this betrayal felt different. Felt like choosing truth over comfort. Reality over fantasy. I returned to face whatever consequences awaited me in the country where I had committed my crimes. The woman who flew home was different from both versions of Eleanor who had existed before. Not the invisible wife. Not the criminal lover. Something new. Something honest. Something that could finally look at herself in mirrors without flinching. I served 18 months in minimum security prison. White-collar facility with libraries and gardens and other women who had made similar mistakes. Richard divorced me while I was incarcerated. Kept the mansion and most of our assets. I kept my jewelry and a small settlement that would cover basic living expenses. My children visit sometimes. Awkward conversations where we all pretend my choices did not permanently damage our relationships. Forgiveness will take time. Maybe more time than I have left. I live in a modest apartment now. 2 bedrooms. Windows that face a parking lot instead of an ocean. Furniture from discount stores instead of exclusive showrooms. But I am not invisible here. My neighbors know my name. The grocery store clerks ask about my health. The librarian recommends books she thinks I might enjoy. Small connections. Real connections. The kind I had forgotten existed. Marcus disappeared completely. Some people say he moved to South America. Others think he changed his identity and started over in Europe. I hope he found whatever he was searching for. I hope it was not just money. The $7.2 million was returned except for about $300,000 we had spent on the villa and travel expenses. Richard recovered most of his fortune and rebuilt his reputation. He married someone younger 6 months after our divorce was finalized. I saw their wedding announcement in the society pages. She looked exactly like I had at 23. Beautiful and empty and eager to be owned. I felt sorry for her. Money is a strange thing. I had it for 20 years and felt poor. Stole it and felt powerful. Lost it and discovered I was actually richer than I had ever imagined. Not financially rich. Emotionally rich. Spiritually rich. Rich in ways that matter when you are lying awake at 3 in the morning thinking about how you have spent your time on this earth. The crime was wrong. I knew it was wrong while I was committing it. But it was also necessary. The only way I could find enough courage to leave a life that was slowly killing me. Sometimes the only escape from one prison is to build a different kind of prison for yourself. At least you get to choose the walls. I volunteer at a shelter for women escaping domestic violence now. Not physical violence like people imagine. Emotional violence. Financial control. The slow erasure of identity that happens when someone treats you like property instead of a person. These women understand something most people do not. Sometimes theft is the only way to steal your own life back from someone who has stolen it first. I do not encourage them to commit crimes. I encourage them to commit truth. To stop pretending everything is fine when everything is broken. To stop being invisible in their own lives. My story is not inspirational. It is cautionary. About the dangers of living for other people instead of yourself. About what happens when loneliness becomes so desperate it transforms into something destructive. But it is also about redemption. About the possibility of starting over even when you have made terrible mistakes. About learning to see yourself clearly instead of through other people's expectations. I am 75 years old now. My hands shake when I write. My memory sometimes fails when I try to remember what happened yesterday. But I remember everything about that spring when I chose to become a criminal instead of remaining a ghost. When I decided that being hated was better than being invisible. Would I make the same choices again? Probably not. I know too much now about the real cost of revenge. The way it poisons everything it touches, including the person seeking it. But I do not regret waking up. I do not regret discovering that I had power even when I felt powerless. I do not regret learning that I could be the author of my own story instead of just a character in someone else's. Some people will call me a thief. They are right. Some people will call me a victim. They are also right. But most importantly, some people will call me human. Complex and flawed and real. That is the only truth that matters now.